Hello, welcome to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk. I'm here today with a great friend and a person that comes from uh, uh, same high school I'm from, and he's a wonderful guy, and he's got some great things to talk about going down the road of being an NFL agent from my alma mater, Redan High School, here in DeKalb County in Atlanta, Georgia, or should I say Stone Mountain, Georgia. I'm going to have a fascinating guest with us today. So if you like the show, please join. My name is Coach Kevin Bull Jones, and I'm here with NFL Players Representative Agent Khary Wright. Khary, thank you for coming to the show today. Been wanting to talk to you since we met at a Hall of Fame's introduction at our famous alma mater, and it's just a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Coach, thank you for inviting me on the show. Glad to be here.
Khary, I tell you something. When I look at my career and where I've been as far as coaching and being able to touch some lives and my why of being a football coach, I get a chance to now be on the other side and talk to you because your career path and where you started and where you are now is a truly blessing of thinking about what your inner you wanted to do and what was really in your heart and mind to help boys become men and be able to be productive citizens in life. So please share your background.
Well, again, first and foremost, thank you for having me. Glad to be on the show. So prior to becoming an agent, I was actually a high school math teacher. Taught high school math, also coached football and track for about 9 years. And got to around 2013, I would say. And, at that particular point, it was almost like I don't want to call it a literal crossroads, but, ultimately I was trying to determine where I wanted to take things career-wise, and especially when it came to sports. And I've always been involved in multiple avenues, but nevertheless, as you know, as a coach, you do what you can for the kids. And once they get to the end of their high school career, you essentially have to let them go.
Right.
And it dawned upon me that there were certain athletes, who were reaching the heights that they were, but didn't really have anybody who was in the business that could give them that additional insight, additional guidance, similar to what we did as high school teachers and coaches. Wow. And so I decided around that time, after discussing it with my family, to pursue, becoming an agent, because I figured that, that it would build that necessary bridge, from the kids going to high school, going through college, and then they will have somebody there waiting on them to help guide them, from being that young man that we try to build up, into the grown man that we'd like to see them become. And so, upon considerations, I took that route. Obviously went through the stringent application process, and of course there is a background check that you have to get through first. From there, it's just a matter of, taking the knowledge of the business to the next level, getting a greater understanding of the CBA, but also any of your policies that involve players. And so your recreational drug policies, your performance enhancing drug policies, agent regulations, things of that sort. Went through the seminar that the NFLPA puts us through, and took the test. And of course, it was no brainer that I was going to pass that test. And once I passed the test, it was essentially, here you are, here's your bag in the middle of nowhere, and figure out your way home.
Yeah, that is that's profound. So, for being part of Pick Six Sports Management Company, NFL agent, homegrown, this is a second career for you. Think about you. I think about Steve Harvey used to always have on his show talking about leap. Take that leap. You believe in something to the point where it's in you, but some people are afraid to take that leap. You weren't afraid of it. You had years of being, and I tell anybody that's a school teacher, I think a lot of parents feel the same way I do about teaching is not easy, no matter what grade you teach, especially with this pandemic going on now. Everybody's virtual classes, but you were in the work factory of being in the classrooms. So you changed careers, and I want you to talk about what you learned from being a school teacher, because sometimes people tell us to have something to fall back on, you know, and unfortunately, I think some people don't. Some people really take that too far sometimes because they never chased their dreams. You didn't do that. You decided somewhere. What was the key moment that got you to say, "Aha, I'm gonna make this move"?
It's interesting you asked me that question because the process started around the summer of 2007. And the first individual that planted that seed was another homegrown Atlanta boy by the name of Kelly Campbell that went to Mays High School. And, of course, Georgia Tech, played in the league. And, we were sitting down in his basement one day, and he looked over at me and he just asked me, he said, "Why don't you become an agent?" He said, "We need guys like you. A lot of these guys do not care about us. They aren't really that concerned with us. You're the type of guy that players could use in this business." And so at that time, I thought about it a little bit, but, in that particular moment, I just felt like, the educator in me, because I come from a family full of educators. And so, it's naturally in me to educate kids. No matter what I do, I recognize and I stand strong upon that regardless of what I do, I will educate. And so, again, once we got to around 2013, 2014, there were so many tribulations, I would say, even within the school system, but also seeing, having a lot of some teachers and some coaches that I was fairly close with, to see a couple of them retire and then, less than a year later pass away. Or, while I was at Redan, there was a particular basketball coach that passed away before the season started. And what that made me realize was, time waits on no man. And ultimately, again, education would always be there for me. And so it's just at that moment, once he passed away, it kind of hit me. And I thought to myself, as much time as you think you have left, you may not have as much left. And so therefore, why not just take that leap, follow through on some dreams. And ultimately, the worst case scenario, I can still be a teacher.
Correct. Yeah. And see, here's the thing about it. And this is what I try to tell young coaches. There is a teaching part of us. We apply it to football because that's the mode that we're in. But there is a teaching element to being practical about things that we want in life and how we want to go about getting it. It's just a matter of, are we afraid to step out on faith and make that move? Because there is a teaching concept to everything, even first-year coaches dealing with first-year players, things of that nature. I got a chance to meet you when we were at the Hall of Fame induction at our alma mater, Redan High School. And one thing that stuck out to me when talking to you is when you mentioned that you were an agent. Here's the thing: a great friend of mine, of both of ours, and a mentor for me as far as in teaching and coaching, Greg Goodwin, who's done so much for Major League Baseball as far as minorities and people being drafted and kids getting the opportunity to play baseball. He's a former baseball player at Tennessee State University himself. But for him to pioneer and have that love of helping kids go from high school to collegiate levels and the pros in baseball was always an attraction of me about where his love was. It was very profound. And I only say that because when he introduced me to you, when you talked about being an agent, I had met some other agents before in all my years of coaching high school ball here in Metro Atlanta. And I have quite a few players that are currently in the league and were in the league. So the agent, my agent, an agent in induction of meeting people wasn't too good.
Right.
But when I met you, there was a glow about the caring aspect about what you do. And that was the thing that intrigued me the most. When I walked away from you, I felt that. And I told Coach Goodwin, Greg Goodwin, I said, there's something about that guy and what he does. And he further talked about how you made that. He didn't even talk about you being a school teacher at one time. He talked about you being a former track star, football player at Redan High School, but how you had a burning desire to help people as far as with football and money. And that's where I want to go with the next question. That whole that journey. Talk to us about your first couple of times, because once you got your certification to be an NFL agent, who was there to help you along the way to make it through those baby steps?
Interesting you asked that question. So, and before I expound upon that, definitely shout out to Coach Goodwin. Again, that was an example of somebody who, although he was an educator, he also served as that liaison for players and just being a scout, within certain organizations. And so, he showed that it was possible to do both and to do both effective. It's interesting because when you get into the business, me being an educator, you kind of assume that there's going to be somebody right there to help you along. And what I realize is that, whenever you're dealing with money, specifically in sports and entertainment, it's a dog eat dog business. And, unfortunately, you have some individuals who choose not to give you insight whatsoever, because they feel as though any dollar that they help you ultimately make is also going to take dollars out of their pocket.
Right.
So now that being said, I will shout out one veteran agent who I don't think has been given enough credit within this business by the name of Kevin Poston, who's been an agent since the 90s. Him and his brother Carl Poston have, represented guys in multiple sports, football and basketball, and also have Hall of Famers. They were Shaq's first agents, matter of fact. And I remember talking to Carl Poston, during an agent event, and one of the things he told me, he said, normally I don't deal with other agents because it's a slimy business. He said, but there's something about you and the fact that you're coming out of the field of education that lets me know that you're really here for the right reasons. So he told me, here's my number, here's my email address, here's my secretary's number. If you need anything, give me a call. And so that was one of the guys who, upon being in the business for a couple of years, helped kind of guide me along through some things. But, a lot of it, I was literally trying to learn on the go. Wow. And frankly, and it's unfortunate that it is like this, but because I have the love and the passion for young people, in some ways it could be a detriment in this business simply because you don't really have you're not really in tune into, as to, the certain traps and pitfalls that wait on you. And you assume that everybody is going to recognize that you're here for the right reasons. And thus, you'll reap the benefits of being in it for the right reasons. And unfortunately, some individuals aren't at that point. Some parents are not at that point. Other family members and friends, who may serve as what you would consider the contact person or, the middleman, if you want to call it, they may have other intentions themselves.
Right. So that leads me to this observation, and I want you to fill in the blank how this goes. You get a chance to approach a prospective client, and you have to give a sales pitch. Now, for us, what we've seen on TV, we've seen it one way on TV, but I want you to elaborate on, is it really that way where you get your 3 minutes or your 30 seconds or, because you have to compete against the big guys, the big companies that sometimes flex their muscles according to who the player is. Give me your steps into that process when you introduce yourself to that prospective client.
Right. So, one thing I will say, just to piggyback off of that, if a young guy wants to go with one of the bigger companies, it's not that much that I can personally do. Some of them they hear about certain agents or agencies, and so when they get that call or hear that name, then they've already essentially made their decision, and that's okay at times for the families and players, who are a little more open. One of the things that I make very clear is that if you want personal attention, so if you want that guy that is going to be easily accessible, number one, who you can reach out and call in the middle of the night, who will actually, sit down and eat dinner with you and have meaningful conversations, also just help you with the overall, just being dedicated to the overall development as a young man, because as you know, this is a very short-lived sport. The average player is playing. The average years are getting shorter and shorter. Now you're looking at less than 5 years. And
right.
As you know, that's position predicated, because depending on the position, such as a running back, for example, you're looking at an average of about, maybe 2 3/4 years to play in the league. And so therefore, it really depends upon what that player and that family prioritizes. Bottom line is, if they prioritize somebody who's going to be with them from now through the rest of their life, because as I tell guys, I'm your agent for life. So
right.
Even when you're not playing, when you're no longer playing, I'm still there to help you with that transition and to see you continue to grow and get married and have kids and, to watch them grow. So if you're looking for that guy, then I am that guy. If you're looking for somebody who's going to give you insight upon the business and to
right.
teach you different things that most people are not going to tell you about the business, then I'm your guy. Somebody who's going to give you an honest assessment and, really not try to give you a sales pitch as if I'm selling vacuum cleaners or knives door to door.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that's what some people do.
Right.
Some flex the finances that they can give. And, one of the things I will tell parents and players is no need to have somebody front you your own money, because that's really what's happening. And this is when my math lessons come into play. So I tell, and I give you an example. You have certain parents and players who, may go with the guy who offers them a certain advance. And I'll just throw a number out there. Let's say the advance is $250,000. Well, because me and you both have kids, I don't think I've ever pulled up to McDonald's and got a Happy Meal for free for the kids. So if you can't get a Happy Meal for free from McDonald's, do you really think $250K, which by the way, even at the maximum commission that we can take, we only get 30 G's for every $1 million a player makes. And That's maximum. And so you have to start doing the math and ask yourself the question, well, why are they giving me this much up front? That's number one. Secondly, people have to understand the tax bracket that you're in.
Okay.
And so to pay that kind of money back, which by the way, in some cases, you're looking at an extra 20% interest to pay it back. So 250K turns into 300K. But since you'll probably get half of your money taken in taxes, you literally have to gross 600 to pay somebody back 300. And so when we have those conversations, you see the 30 for 30 Brokes part 1, part 2, and they could really do a part 3, part 4, part 5, and part 6 if they chose to. But these are the types of insights that will help families and players understand, what they're really getting themselves into.
Yeah.
Upon taking those type of things. So, again, my rule of thumb is real simple. I'm going to be with you. I'm dedicated to you. There's a sense of loyalty. There's a sense of care. Education, is always in place. And as a player, you and your well-being will always be the priority.
Right. So I guess that means that You don't pull up in the Lamborghini and come in on your own helicopter to a prospective client's backyard and or Lamborghini or helicopter. You don't wow them. It sounds like you don't wow them with that first. It is a true, honest conversation about where this thing, expectations of where this thing could possibly go, if that's what I'm hearing correctly from you.
Absolutely, coach. And the bottom line is how you establish the relationship, and that's with any relationship. How you establish the relationship, that's going to be the expectation from here on out. And it could work for the player, but sometimes it works against the player. If you allow somebody to wow you in that fashion, or you had those motives on your end, and what happens when you get hurt, when you get suspended, and you're no longer making money. You can't expect somebody to be willing to give you that type of time or really call you and check on you, when the reality is your relationship was established strictly upon what somebody could give you.
Right.
And so that, again, that goes with anything. I often tell players all the time, I say, look, do you want to get treated, like somebody who I want to be around for the long term? Or, or are you section hopping like the club? Are you going to the section where you see the most bottles, or are you going with the people who, are actually really with you, really down with you? And they have to, and players and families have to make that decision and to, make that decision carefully. Otherwise, you look up and you're in your mid-20s, your career is over, and you realize that the people that you had amongst you really weren't with you.
See, Khary, that's that caring element again of dealing with the man beyond the playing years, and with myself having current players in the league, and then having players that have completed their years in the league, and now they're making adjustments to the real world. See, I still have those relationships with my players, like a lot of high school coaches do. So let me say that, because there are some great high school coaches that care about their players, and it's not just football, it's life, just the way you mentioned it. So if I can, let me ask you this: is it okay to, let's talk about, some of the if we can, some of the clients that you've been able to help in the past, whether they've been free agents or drafted, or just some highlights and players that not going to all their business, but you saw them as being a bright spot because of the success that they chose to follow in their career, but more importantly, having you on as to represent them, and they moving forward and taking advantage of their chances. Can you get a chance to kind of hit a few, 2 or 3 there? Possible?
Sure. Yeah, sure. No problem. So, and I give you a mixture of guys.
Okay.
So Sterling Bailey out of University of Georgia, that's my guy. Okay. Somebody that, we still have a lot of meaningful conversations. Lamar
Right.
Holmes, former Falcon, lineman.
Yep.
Good family man, kids, doing excellent. Jonathan Massaquoi, that's another one. Again, that's me and him are still cool. Michael Taylor out of Westlake High School, that's one. Miles Gooch, who I coached at Redan. He's one of those guys I wish, would have had more of an opportunity, and unfortunately, the ACL and meniscus injury cost him a deal,
Right.
But and early on in his career, Matt Brown, went to MLK, went to Redan first as well. But so those are some of the guys that I've represented. It's a few other ones as well, that have gotten some snaps in the league that I'm in very close contact with. Again, some of them I'm not, but a lot of them I am. And, it's interesting that you asked me that, because when I first got in the business, I was really more so looking towards the guys that I already had connections with. But also, I think I got a little spoiled. I got a couple guys on some rosters who, as some people told me, they said, you pulled a rabbit out the hat. And I my first 2 years, I felt like I pulled a rabbit out the hat 3 times. But because I did it 3 times, it got me a little spoiled, and not really didn't allow me to recognize that that's not really how the business works. That's more of an outlier than the norm itself.
Wow. So now we're 2020, and we're dealing with the pandemic. It's in January. We're coming up on the Super Bowl, and players in the fall season are making their bids to find agents and move on to the next level. And then something profound that came about. It didn't really happen because of pandemic, but at least the NFL was thinking. They had an HBCU combine
Right.
that I thought was amazing. However, the pandemic really just kind of put the clamps on that happening. But I hats off to the NFL for thinking and the powers that be that were thought ahead on that. So here we are, 2020. Tell us about where your Pick Six Sports Entertainment is as far as clients, and what do you do now? And we're in this pandemic state. Tell us.
So the tide is different, of course. Normally this time of year it's a lot more traveling. You're prepping to go to games as you do, yourself. Preparing yourself to, depending on the school, of course, have an opportunity to, rub elbows with certain individuals, wave a hand at certain players. More importantly, have conversations with family members, and a lot of that will be obsolete this season. However, at this point, more than anything, it's about still doing the best that you can by way of, telephone, Zoom calls, et cetera, et cetera. So, as with everything in life right now, there are adjustments that have had to be made, but, business is still up and running. Essentially, you're still preparing to service players. Excuse me. And so, every year I look to, hopefully lock in about 3 to 5 players. And, from a draft prep standpoint and everything else that entails, that's still in place. So now it's just a matter of, again, having those conversations and hopefully, pulling a few guys this year, and being able to service them as I normally would.
Right. A question that I like to ask my guests, because I had to turn it on me when I started off in coaching and where I went as far as my mentorship and people that I listened to. And right now, you're not on the senior crew right now as far as age. You're in a great place. But what would you say to the younger Khary Wright that was coming out of college and was deciding what he wanted to do? What would today's Khary Wright tell that young man coming out of college about career and life, chasing your goals?
Follow your passions. Don't be scared, especially at that age. There's a lot more chances that you can take without, causing any harm to, family members. So prior to marriage and kids, you're in position to step out on faith, while still having a hand to fall in, essentially. And so again, follow the passions. Don't be scared. Take more chances, and you'll still come out fine either way.
That's fascinating. I often wonder, we got one of those time machines. We can go back and I know they make movies about it, but be able to go back in time. That is very profound. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Khary. I wanted you to be able just to talk about, some of those things that happen when the nuts and bolts of what really goes on with being an agent. We are so happy here at 100 Yards of Football to have you come on the show. Glad that you're a Raider alum, along with the many Rita and Raider alums all across the country. I'm glad that you're putting your part to society to help people be successful. It's very important, your job. And the great part about it and the fun part about it, having you on the show, is that you bring a reality of caring to a really tough, cutthroat business. And I wanted you to be able to come on the show and just talk to people about there's another side to this NFL agent stuff. and you definitely exemplify those things that bring a light to it. So we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Coach. Listen, anytime I'll come back, there are a lot of other things I could give insight on as well. If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Agent Wright ATL. Actually just got a Twitter page. I guess that was a week ago. Again, Agent Wright ATL. So whatever questions that anybody may have, always feel free to reach out to me.
Well, in this crazy maze of football during this pandemic, rest assured that my viewers will be seeing your face again. We will be joining up again. Things change every day. So we're definitely going to have you come back to the show, and we're going to let you pull out that pen and paper and talk these numbers. So these parents and other folks, when they see all these big numbers on TV on contracts, we can have you break down what's really going on behind the scenes. And when the smoke clears, how much money they're really making. So we're going to definitely have you come back on the show for that. Thank you so much.
Coach, that's what I like to do anytime.
Well, if you like the show, please share. We are 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk. Thank you, Khary Wright from Pick Six Sports Entertainment, former Redan High School alum, football player, and track star. Thank you for spending time with us today. We'll see you next time.